Everyone has moments in life they can't just stop thinking about. They can be embarrassing things, like that one time you face planted in front of a group of teenagers, or something amazing like the first time you hosted your family for the holidays. And on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, hosted by me, Keke Palmer, and presented by BMW, we know to savor the good memories and let go of the bad. And one thing everyone remembers fondly is their first time behind the wheel of a BMW. So come join me and BMW this summer as we explore pop culture moments and topics you just can't stop thinking about on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, sponsored by BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Little Cuts, our weekly minisode where we dig into the things that we've been watching recently. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth. This week we are talking Ghosts Under the Water, Ghosts in Soho, Ghosts in the Woods, and Hold My Beer the movie.
One of these is not like the other one.
Sure isn't. And I cannot wait to discuss it.
I can't either. So we both watched, speaking of, let's, I guess, start from the beginning, Ghosts Underwater.
Yeah.
We both watched The Deep House. And I am
did.
really curious what you thought about this as the found footage aficionado that you are.
Okay. Well, The Deep House is a film. It's by the directors who did Inside.
Mm-hmm.
Alexandra Bustillo and Julianne Maury, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially a haunted house movie that takes place underwater. So this couple, they're YouTubers. They want, the guy in the relationship is obsessed with getting views. He is also played by Mick Jagger's son, James Jagger.
Oh,
which
shit,
is very
that
weird. Yeah.
I didn't put that together.
Yeah. And they basically go to this remote location thinking they're going to get something really cool for their YouTube channel, and they end up finding out that there's something very sinister about this underwater house. And it is... God. It does the thing that I really hate when a film won't, commit to found footage.
Okay.
It flips back and forth between, first-person perspective with some really interesting shots of, what they see underwater, the meters they have, the cameras that they use, but they also switches to just regular kind of narrative filmmaking style at the beginning and kind of throughout when they're underwater. And I really don't like when they switch things out like that without much of a conceit. I don't know. It just, that is one of my least favorite things people do with found footage. Either sprinkle it in or commit fully. I feel like this movie wanted to be found footage, but it was there are some parts that are too hard to do as found footage, so we'll just won't do them that way. And I was like, well, then don't do found footage. You know what I mean? Don't dedicate the that kind of format, I guess, in my head. That kind of bothered me a little bit.
I guess what I would say, because I know exactly what you're talking about, because this movie, and I mean, I think another movie we're going to talk about kind of does this as well in some cases.
Yes, it does.
But what I guess what worked for me in regards to that with this particular thing is that it made the opening of the movie feel very open. and sort of like just wide ranging and naturalistic. And then the moment they go underwater, it like, she has thoughts.
I leave the door cracked so she won't do that. And she's just such a brat. Anyway.
But we love her.
Such a brat. We love her, but she's a brat. Anyway.
So it had that it's very wide opening. There's a lot of naturalistic, there's a lot of traditional cinematography, but the moment they get underwater, it makes it feel even more claustrophobic for me. And so I appreciated that dynamic for it because, I mean, yes, you're right. There are some more traditional cinematography, but at least it's blamed on Tom. They have like a little drone underwater camera that's filming as well with them. So I don't know, for that, it kind of worked for me just because from a perspective aspect of going from wide open woods to this very claustrophobic, we're stuck in this house underwater type feel to it. So for me, it kind of worked.
Okay.
But I can understand.
Fair. Yeah, I think like that bothered me a little bit, but I did really like, well, some of like the ghost aspects might not have totally worked for me. I really liked like the conceit and kind of the daring they put behind it, because this was almost all shot under actual water. Like this was not CGI. Like they built this big like tank they filmed in, and a lot of this was filmed underwater, which I think is really interesting. And I think they did something really fascinating with the idea of hauntings not in the typical location and kind of changing up the haunted house. And I think there's some really fascinating kind of lore going on here that I wish had been built up a little bit more and not kind of crammed towards like the back half. You know what I mean? Like it did feel a little bit like an exposition dump and not as paced as well as it could have been. But I liked how they're really trying to like flip the script on the typical haunted house and like change like the way you think about what it means to be in a haunted house and like how people typically interact with a haunted house. Here, it's so different because they're underwater. Like, yeah, it's a house, but like when you're underwater and don't have oxygen, there's different ways like you completely change how you interact with your space. So I thought that was really quite interesting about how the typical thing that we're so used to in horror, it feels very foreign.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ghosts in this are all played by people, and they're you know, moving through the water as a person would through water. And sometimes that worked because it kind of gave them sort of that kind of implacable kind of killer vibe that they're slowly moving towards you. But other times I'm like, it kind of reminded me of the the moment in Scary Movie 2 where Brenda's like, girl, this is Bones. Why are you running from this? Like, where it's like these people are just slowly floating through the water towards them. And I'm like, okay, but you have like flippers. You can like totally like stay away from them because they are slowly moving towards you. Slowly. In a way that like reminded me of Jaws 3 with the sharks slowly coming towards the camera at the very end, where I'm like, everyone's like, no. And it goes on for forever because the shark is so slowly moving towards so there's I don't know. There's aspects of that. I do think that the story behind the movie might actually be more interesting than the movie because of the idea that they had that tank and they had to bring in pieces of the house and they would submerge underwater to do filming, but they couldn't keep it completely underwater because then it would ruin the set design. I think the set design of the actual house is really stunning. So there is stuff in here that like you can see why Alexandra and Julian are known for their movies. There's some other filmmaking in this is really stellar, and then some of it is just like, this maybe might have been a better idea on paper than in execution. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely like a cool technical marvel, and it's pretty short, so it's not like you're going into like a super long movie. It's definitely interesting, and I love how daring they are as filmmakers. Like, I will say, they make some crazy stuff, and like, you can't fault them for doing some really fascinating things with the genre and trying to change up how we think about the genre. So I think it's a fascinating watch. I think like, you know, the performances aren't my favorite, but I think there's some interesting stuff going on here in terms of like what we can make a haunted house be. So, you know, I think it's worth checking out. Just go in with like low-ish expectations, but you'll have a good time.
And it's, I think it's, when this episode drops, it should be playing on Epix, which I think you can like subscribe to through VOD stuff and you can watch it. Sort of like what they did with Saint Maud, right? I think Saint Maud was Epix.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the Deep House. I'm a little bit bummed about it, but
Yeah.
you know, that's okay. But what about these ghosts in Soho?
Okay, so I feel like I'm the only person on horror Twitter that liked this movie, but I saw Edgar Wright, his new movie, The Last Night in Soho, which was co-written by him and Christy Wilson Cairns, who also wrote 1917 and wrote a few episodes of Penny Dreadful, the original, not the redone. Was like involved with Penny Dreadful. So this movie is not what I expected. It is set mostly in the now. I thought it was set in 1960s, and it is about this young woman played by Thomasin McKenzie, who I think is a fabulous screen presence. I loved watching her. I think she owns the screen in such a powerful way. So she plays this woman named Eloise, who is going to school for fashion in London. And she has this terrible, like, it's definitely has a setup similar to Suspiria, and that she's moved into this kind of academy. She's living in this dorm. The people in the dorm are kind of shit to her, but instead of like Suspiria and staying in the dorm, she decides to go spend her meager money to rent this room in this kind of creepy old house that has been there for forever, run by this older woman who has like these strict rules about no boys after 8, and the place is all like done up almost like it's 60s, but that's fine for Eloise because she loves the 60s. She loves that music and stuff. So she moves in, and the very first night that she's there, she has this dream where she is following a woman named Sandy in 1960s, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. So you have two great screen presences here between Anya and Thomasin. And she's following Sandy as she kind of goes through trying to make it as a singer in 1960s, and she gets this manager, Jack, played by Matt Smith, Doctor Who. Things start to go poorly for Sandy, and what seemed like a sort of wish fulfillment for Eloise of like living vicariously through someone in the 60s while she's sleeping starts to turn into more of a nightmare and starts to affect her in the present. And so it's a ghost story. Okay. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe it's just Edgar Wright's time to take whippings on Twitter, but like I guess I'm also in the minority for liking Baby Driver. So I mean, take whatever I say with a grain of salt, but I really enjoyed Baby Driver. I've not seen a bad movie that Edgar Wright has done. I think this movie is very stylish. I don't think it's as stylish as some of his earlier movies. I think it's a lot more restrained in that nature. I think that it shows an immense love for a bunch of horror genre films from like the 70s, and a lot of romance and a lot of regular dramas from throughout history. Yes, the characters might be a little thin, but I get enough for what I need to see that it doesn't bother me. I mean, it's a story. It's telling a different story about ghosts and about kind of that wish fulfillment of nostalgia of looking back at that time at a specific point that you might have a nostalgic love for, and realizing that it's just as shitty as it is today. There's one point where Thomasin shows up in London, and she's being driven by this cab driver, and the cab driver goes from saying that, you know, yeah, London might look different, but it's still the same thing from the 60s. And then he asks, hey, where are you living? And he's like, I think we can like, talk about, if you don't have money, there's other ways you can make, like, there's that kind of aspect that like, it is saying like, yeah, you might look back at the 60s with some kind of idea of some glamorized look, but it's still as shitty as it is today, and nothing really changes. And so that is a big core of the story here. And so I don't know, I really fell under its spell, and I think it's a good movie. But I look on Twitter and feel like I'm in the minority there.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I just heard that Edgar Wright just does not write women very well. Is kind of like a lot of the consensus that I've seen just from Twitter sentiment is that he just doesn't write his female characters very well.
But it was also co-written, though. I mean, so it's not all him.
Yeah, that's true.
It was co-written by a woman with a woman, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. You can still not write good characters, good female characters, and be a woman. But I don't know. I still need to see it, and I am curious about it because I have heard like wide ranging things about it. So I thought it was fun.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah. But again, I also love Edgar Wright.
Yeah, I mean, I like him a lot too. I didn't hate Baby Driver. I don't think I liked it when I saw it for what it was. Like, but I also really I like the Cornetto trilogy. I really like those movies. Like, those are incredible. We all know that. But
and I mean, I also like Scott Pilgrim.
I fucking love Scott Pilgrim.
Okay, good.
I forgot that he did Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah. Oh,
that's right. Man, I love those comic books and that movie. It's so fun.
Yeah, I don't think he's made a bad movie. But I feel like between Baby Driver and this movie, it's like all of a sudden, you know, it's his turn to take the Twitter lashings. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. But now you have also seen Paranormal Activity Next of Kin.
I have seen Paranormal Activity Next of Kin.
Dying to hear your thoughts on it. I saw your tweet and we've talked a little bit, but I am really curious to like kind of dive in more, a little bit, maybe a little bit more spoiler-ishy.
Excuse me. Yeah, let's do that. So,
okay.
Listeners, we'll put time codes in the description of the podcast just so you can avoid spoilers. But I think we should chat some spoilers here.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw it. We talked about it briefly last week. I saw it on Friday. It's Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. It's the 7th Paranormal Activity movie. Not much to do with what is going on in the previous 6. Like Terry said last time, it's about a woman who discovers that she is Amish, in scare quotes, which we will reveal. Her mom, like, she was born into an Amish family and she was given up for adoption, and now she's like found her family again and is like making a documentary about her Amish family that she never knew, and is like trying to kind of like make sense of who she is. And of course nothing is what it seems in this spooky Amish farm. So this has a similar problem to what I talked about with the Deep House, in that like it just decides to sometimes not be found footage, but not enough for it to make any fucking sense. You know what I mean? Like, the Deep House, there was a little bit more of, like, enough of it was out of found footage that I was like, all right, like, I get it. I'm still annoyed by it, but, like, I get it. But there are points where I'm like, why couldn't you just had this be him shooting it instead of this weird, like, you show him holding the camera and no one else is filming? Like, it's very... The stylistic choices, I think, are, like, super uneven, which is super disappointing, because it's a Paranormal Activity movie, and like I've talked about 5,000 bajillion times, like the first movie set up these standards of like what it means to like have found footage and like security cameras and static camera, and there is like none of that static camera stuff, which makes me so mad. Like, there was not really any, like, I feel like most of them have a cool moment where like everyone's asleep and something is filming, and like I get that they want to like expand upon the Paranormal Activity movies and like don't want to do the same things over and over again. But this movie is so different in scope and size and everything that it's hard to see it as a Paranormal Activity movie. And like, I've seen a lot of those complaints online. I don't necessarily agree with that. I have a lot of reasons why. We can get into that if we want. But the other thing that really annoyed me was the music singers and the sound effects that were very obviously non-diegetic. Like, they weren't like... They were things that like make you jump more.
But they used them like it's okay. I wouldn't have a problem with it if it was something that was in the entire movie. But it's like they picked and choose specific moments to include music. Like, there's nothing, and then all of a sudden we're going to have a music stinger. So I'm like, sort of like how you're saying with this sort of traditional cinematography vice, the cameras, it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too. They don't know what to do. Are we going to do it this way? Are we going to do it this way? We're going to do whatever we feel like in the moment. And I feel that the same way with the music scores, the stingers.
I agree. So I think that those two stylistic choices were like pretty poor, and I think could have really been avoided. I don't truly understand why they made those decisions. I know that Chris Landon, who wrote the movie, I think, like kind of went off on Twitter about this whole thing in a rather childish way about how like, fuck you guys, like we weren't gonna suck fan dick and like put all these Easter eggs in it and like make it. I'm like, chill. Like, it was very aggressive about the people who didn't like the movie, and I was like, oh my god, like relax. Like, it's very intense, like very, very, very like a lot about like the criticism of the movie, because it doesn't have like There's no Katie. There isn't like a Toby, but there is a demonic presence. And I kind of like this idea of having. The hard thing is, like, Paranormal Activity is known for taking place, like, solely in a domestic space. You don't really leave the domestic space. Like, you're in one place for most of the movie. So it's a little bit more contained. It feels a little bit more terrifying. Here, it's a much more wider in scope in that, like, they're traveling to multiple locations. The house they're in is not their house. They walk through the woods. There's a church that they film in. So the scope is more of like a traditional, like, found footage movie in terms of, like, the spaces that they film in. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that they expanded it. I like that they kind of investigated a different kind of domestic space and, like, what is part of this domestic space. In this one, there's, like, the house, the barn, and the church. So it's bigger in scale. But I think they did something really cool here in creating a new mythology that is, like, quasi-related to, like, the cult witchy stuff of the original 6 and continuing something not necessarily related, but, like, a similar kind of vibe in terms of female inherited, like, demonic curse stuff. Which I really liked and have a lot of thoughts about how, like, women are the only ones that can bear this. There was this whole monologue where one of the Amish boys is like, only women can bear the pain of this curse. Women are the only ones strong enough to hold it back. And I was like, fascinating. Fucking fascinating. So, like, I have to unpack that at some point in my brain on paper, probably. But I think that there is a lot of, like, Blair Witch vibes a little bit here.
Oh,
and, like, Blair Witch vibes, some cult horror vibes. And I liked that a lot. Like, I know people, like, wanted it to be more like Paranormal Activity, but I did kind of like it branching out. I thought there was some really interesting stuff that they were trying to do with that, which I appreciated.
I mean, you have 6 movies of the same, kind of the same thing going over and over again. It's like a stationary camera in a house. I mean, at what point is that? Can you not iterate on that? And the only way to, like, to move forward is to do something completely different. And so it didn't bother me. It still had some of the kind of aspects of it, like the days, like we're counting the days. It sort of lacks, cards. It lacked the sort of, like, suspense that, because one of the things I liked about Paranormal Activity, and we talked about this in our audio commentary for Paranormal Activity, is the way that, like, you start to dread those title cards as it went into night because things were getting progressively worse at nighttime. And you miss that here because it's just basically counting down the days. But you have that aspect of it. Like you said, you have the sort of, like, inherited, like, witchy, culty stuff going on. There's, like, a demon. There's, like, aspects of that kind of cult. Like, I think that it takes this sort of thematic aspects of what makes Paranormal Activity and then just blows it up in a greatest hits way. Like, I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, this feels like it could be wrecked. There's a point in here where the demon's chasing after them, and it's so claustrophobic.
So good. I love that, though. Like, so this movie has, like, a physical presence that is a monster. There isn't, like, the shadows. Like, there is a physical creature. And I loved that. I think we needed something like that in Paranormal Activity. I think, like, yes, there's something terrifying about, like, the unseen presence. But again, like we've said, there's been 6 of these movies. And I think having this more tangible force is something as a breath of fresh air for what these movies are. And it's a little less like, oh, what was that? And more like, oh no, like, there's a fucking terrifying monster. And the found footage aspect now is like Wreck, where you're hiding in the dark, trying not to be loud. It felt, so I thought about this watching it, and I saw this comparison online. It felt like a Resident Evil game. Like, it felt like Resident Evil 7 to me a little bit. Like, in terms of a lot of, like, the first person camera, night vision
like
stuff,
Outlast.
and, like, hiding behind, like, hiding behind hay bales and, like, navigating around this farm to avoid this creature.
And you're in a place that is unfamiliar to you. So there's, like, that aspect of it. It's not your home that you're trying to, that you know all the places of. This is, like, not somewhere that you're used to.
And what's really interesting, though, too, is, like, this concept of home in this is really different because technically, like, she was born there and that's where her mom is from. And, like, it plays with this idea of a home, but not really. And what that means for the protagonist in this, where it's like, this is where she was born and where her mom grew up, but it's not really a home. And I think that's a really interesting, like, tension that is present in this movie, and it investigates familial ties in a much different way, but still having that, like, the familial connection, like, kind of through line of Paranormal Activity.
It also has a hole in the ground that was absolutely terrifying.
Yes, there is in fact a hole in the ground that I liked. I got as above so below vibes from it, but I liked how they used, like, those spaces, like different levels of space. I don't know, and like that, the third act is absolutely crazy. I wish there was more of the gore at the end. I think there's like this incredible moment where just like all hell has broken loose and like everything's on fire and people are bleeding,
gouging
and, like,
out their eyes, and yeah,
it's pretty crazy. And
insanity.
So like it's chaos, and I thought that was really fucking cool because again, like, Paranormal Activity finales are usually big, like they're pretty small because it's like one family and it's like usually a pretty big finale, but relatively small scale. And here it's more like it's chaotic, which I really appreciated. And I think they opened it up for, they had it pretty open-ended. So if they want to make another one, there is a possibility that another one will come. I don't know, man. I think I liked it a lot. I think
really
that people have a lot of complaints about it, and like I guess I get it, but at the same time, I was it's really stylish because like they have the weird moments where it's not found footage, but there are a lot of moments where they like acknowledge, oh, we have a nice, like a DP who is using, like, he is filming a documentary. So the cinematography is so beautiful because he is trying to make it look pretty. Like, they play with slow-mo at one point, and I wish I had done more of this, but, like, they introduced, like, the slow-mo cam and, like, how many frames per second, and then the camera glitches at one point in slow-mo and, like, part of the climax, and it was so cool.
It's beautifully filmed, and it's because of Pedro Luque. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name, who was a cinematographer in Don't Breathe.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And Don't Breathe too, but we're just not going to acknowledge that one.
What I need, though, I need a found footage movie to use drones better.
Yeah.
I thought Blair Witch was going to do that in 2016, and it didn't.
No, that was the biggest
fucking bummer.
Yeah.
And then here they had a drone, and they had like a reveal with like a small reveal with the drone, but I wish I just think there's so much untapped potential with drone footage and found footage that hasn't been used yet. And I get really frustrated when I see them use a drone. I'm like, what cool thing are we going to reveal? And then it's just kind of not executed. And it makes me a little like, can you imagine a 30 Days of Night found footage style thing of like everyone like fucking each other up on that farm? Like that would have been fucking incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really would.
I don't know, like, what the logic behind why that would happen. I have not thought it through, but I just think there's such the thing that disappointed me was this movie didn't necessarily do like the technological innovations that I necessarily think of with Paranormal Activity too, like kind of playing. And they did that a little bit with like the slow-mo stuff, but I just don't think they pushed the envelope in the way again that the franchise usually does. But this is me also nitpicking about this is just me loving the franchise and being like, well, they didn't do this one thing. But that doesn't, again, like they aren't beholden to that stuff. I know they're trying to do something new. It's just interesting to see like what they kind of chose to keep versus what they didn't. And also the sound guy was really funny. When he got the berries and cream haircut.
I loved him.
He was cute. I liked to.
That's the way to do comic relief. He wasn't obnoxious. Like, I thought he was actually genuinely funny.
He's a silly man. Yeah, I liked him a lot. So, and I also like that this one, again, there was a black, like the film, the guy who operated the camera for the most part was a black man. Mm-hmm. And I just, there are not a lot of black people in found footage. So it was just kind of nice to have like one of the only characters in the movie be a black guy and have it not be like it's a black guy and just have it be like a black character in a found footage movie. Like it's just so unusual, especially in Paranormal Activity. Besides the marked ones, which was all about like Latinx communities, they're all very white besides that one. So it was kind of nice to see at least one not white face in the film as well. You know, little things like that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's bananas. I think they really swung for the fences and didn't, to continue my baseball thing here. It wasn't a total home run, but it was. I know sports. But I enjoyed it. And I think the ending and I think the angle that they took with the folk horror cult stuff was really cool. And I think made a lot of sense for Paranormal Activity. And I know people might not think that, but I think it was like a logical next step for sure to lean into that folk horror aspect. So, boop, I liked it.
I loved it. So I'm here for it.
I don't agree with you that it's better than the first one. I will say
that might have been reaching a bit.
I do disagree with you on that, but that's okay. I still really liked it. So
I might be reaching with that one. I do think that of the movies that I've seen of those, this would be one that I would watch more often. I really enjoyed it. I love the finale. The finale for me is just like.
I'm sad they didn't put this in theaters. That finale would be fucking cool.
I know, seriously.
It's a cool...
Imagine this with the right audience in a movie theater.
I will say, I was really mad with the scene where she's confronting the monster and it was not found footage when they could have had her like filming the mom walking towards, or like the creature walking towards her, and they didn't. I was like, that's fucking waste. But whatever. That really frustrated me. I was like, this would have been such a cool scene to have her filming, or like have the camera at her side and like you see the creature walking towards her. Would have been so much more tense, but here I am. Anyway, that's Paranormal Activity. I told you I had a lot of thoughts.
Yeah. Speaking of having a lot of thoughts, you had sent me a text about this next movie that was basically said, the last hour said, hold my fucking beer. So let's talk about Hold My Fucking Beer, the movie. What was our first erotic thriller, Mary Beth?
Our first erotic thriller was Wild Things, starring Denise Richards, Neve Campbell, Matt Dillon, Kevin Bacon, Bill Murray, and a slew of other people. And this film was directed by John McNaughton in 1998. And he also directed Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
He sure as fuck did.
Which is a fascinating range of films, because that movie's fucking gross. And both of these movies are pretty gross, but in very different ways.
So I haven't seen this movie since sometime probably in maybe the early 2000s was probably the last time I watched it. It was one of those watches where I would watch it when my parents went to bed for masturbatory purposes. Let's just not beat around that bush.
Let's just like say what it is. Like, yeah, this is a movie that you watched when you were younger and you jerk off to.
Because it's hot. It's incredibly hot.
Yeah, it is. I had never seen it until last night.
I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, I got some of them in text, but...
You did. This is the best movie I've ever seen. This movie...
So I want to say that when you first texted me and you're like, this movie's going to make me mad, because if you read the synopsis for this movie, it starts in a place that is wildly different than from where it ends.
1000%, yes.
The premise of this movie, according to IMDb, is a police detective uncovers a conspiracy behind a case involving a high school guidance counselor when accusations of rape are made against him by two female students. That is the start of this movie. And I can imagine getting into it and seeing what this is going to be about, how you're like, oh, I'm going to be ready to hate this movie. But then it just goes. And I'm curious what your thoughts were as this was unfolding in front of your eyes.
So, what were my thoughts? By the end, I was like, yeah, motherfucker. Fuck men. Love to see it. Incredible. Was how I ended. I started off like, I fucking hate men. And I ended up with, I fucking hate men, but cheering. Neve Campbell's watching me for my Scream poster as I think about how to say this, so it's very weird that she's watching me. This movie knows what it is, and I love that. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, there's like 6, 7, 10 plot twists in this movie.
I lose track.
Like, it's incredible how many plot twists there are. But, like, this is also a movie that knows how ridiculous it is, I feel like, because it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. I'm surprised I didn't watch this movie younger, because this would have made me realize I was bisexual much quicker if I'd watched this at like a more formative age, because watching the threesome and then Denise Richards and Neve Campbell both try to murder each other and then fuck in the pool.
Yes. While Kevin Bacon is watching on.
While Kevin Bacon is zooming in on them with the video camera and tries to be like, look, it's evidence. And they're like, it's a fucking porno, you goddamn fool. Like, everything about this movie is so 90s male gazy, but it's so obviously male gazy that I can't be mad about it because it's so obviously shot that way. Like, the way that you look at Denise Richards' body, especially where, like, you look down her shirt and you see her white lacy bra, and, like, the way she is framed all times and is dressed, and, like, it's so obviously being like, look at you looking at these young girls. Mm-hmm. To me, is how I interpreted it, and that might be giving the movie too much credit, but it felt like the whole thing to me, or lots of it, were about how these creepy men are viewing these young women as sex objects. And then these women are, in fact, sex objects, but because they want to be sex objects. And again, definitely, like, not an empowering movie necessarily, but I think there's some interesting kind of play going on here with, like, a woman's power, a man's power, these power dynamics. I think because there's so many fucking plot twists in the way it ends, I'm like, I was worried this was going to be like, look at the men, but it wasn't look at the men. So that made me very happy, because I was very concerned we were going to be ending on a note where it was like, haha, women are disposable. And I was going to be like, this movie's terrible, but it doesn't. And
no,
that
it doesn't.
Makes me very happy.
So you talk about the male gaze aspect and like the way that I am wondering if it is intentionally kind of doing it, or if it's sort of like reading too much into it. I think it's intentional, because if you look at the cinematographer, it's the cinematographer behind Top Gun.
Okay.
Jacob's Ladder, oh. True Romance, Stigmata, okay. Mission Impossible 2. I mean, this is a good cinematography. He would eventually go on to direct or to shoot Run the World, Girls by Beyonce, that music video. Oh. I feel like this is a guy that knows what he is shooting.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, like, looking at what he's worked on, because, like, it feels so intentional. You know, like, mm-hmm. it's so obvious when they cut to, like, the girls washing his car, and they're, like, in all white, mm-hmm. and they're soaking each other with like, the hose, and, like, you're meant to be looking at these young girls in this way, very specifically, and you're supposed to feel, it feels dirty and voyeuristic. Like, this whole movie feels very voyeuristic, and they're all, like, when Kevin Bacon is filming them, like, there is very obviously, like, a voyeuristic aspect to this movie.
It's also camp. Like, there is camp performances in this. The mother, Denise Richards' mother, is just like Teresa Russell playing Sandra Van Ryan. She is just giving a camp performance in this. Just like, she knows what she's doing. She's walking out in her bathing suit. She is like, the way she clips, the way her dialogue is so clipped. This is obviously someone playing an affectation, playing a part. I think all these people are playing a part. Bill Murray showing up with the scuzzy lawyer who is wearing like a neck brace because he himself is being like trying to win over, you know, a case against him probably for insurance. You know, there's that. You have Kevin Bacon stepping out of the shower with his wang just hanging there. Like,
I was so hoping that they were going to be gay.
Oh, I know. I made a note about this. I was like, in some other decade, the two would have been gay lovers, and this would have been.
That would have been incredible. I was like, oh my God, are they going to get in the shower together? I was so excited, but they didn't.
I kind of feel like everyone wants to fuck Sam Lombardo, including 100%. Kevin Bacon.
The one character who really pissed me off, though, was the female detective. Just because, like, she was very much like, okay, like, I get that she was right, that the girls were, like, crying wolf about it. But she was just very aggressive. We're like, she's a lying little bitch about, like, accusing him of rape. She was so quick to be like, no, she's a liar. I'm like, I don't like that whole weird vibe. We're getting this, like, internalized misogyny, because also, like, Kelly Van Ryan, who's Denise Richards, is like a Florida socialite, everyone knows who she is, and everyone like talks about her like, oh my God, you're letting her wash your car. Like she already has this sexualized vibe to her, which is so creepy. Again, with the like we just think about fear, and like there's so many parallels with fear. Anyway, but it's just like this like sexual presence that everyone knows about, and even though she is only a teenager, and like that is really nasty. But then they also have like the very rich girl versus the very poor girl, because Neve Campbell's character lives in a trailer, and she like lives in the swamp, and they call her swamp trash, and they have this really interesting like power dynamic that way, and like the money dynamic, but then it's flipped like 5,000 different times. But they just like, there's this assumption from this police officer that like Kelly Van Ryn is like a little bitch. And I was like, fascinating internalized misogyny going on here with how like women were always kind of attacking other women. I mean, it was pretty common and until very recently. It still is in movies and stuff, but like very aggressively like talking shit about like a 17, 18-year-old girl who like was hitting on adult men, but like they shouldn't have been reciprocating.
Right.
Also, that guidance counselor should have been fired immediately. Like, I don't understand how that man still had a job. And also, his sandals are terrible. Why would you ever fuck a guy who wears shoes like that all the time?
I'm sorry, if you look like Matt Dillon, I would probably fuck you if you were wearing the sandals.
Something about him makes me so uncomfortable, though. Like, he is such a scuzz. And a lot of movies I've seen him in, he just plays such a skeezy guy. And, like, the vibe is just so greasy and gross.
I'm not saying I would want to marry him.
No, I know. I get it. I totally get that. But I couldn't have sex with that. I'd be like, you're going to murder me.
Where I'm like, murder me.
Then you're like, no, please do that. And like, meanwhile, I'm texting you like Neve Campbell step on my throat. So like, obviously, like my priorities here are like a little bit different.
But also Neve Campbell step on my throat, because she was, the butchness coming from her was just really doing it for me. I was like,
oh my God. When she is drinking that champagne bottle during the threesome, I was like, I want to be that champagne bottle.
I know. Let me tell you, that scene in particular.
Put your lips on me, baby.
I was like, this is just pure sex, and I was feeling it. When he takes
off her underwear, it's a really hot scene. Like, can he just, like, takes off her underwear?
Pouring the champagne over the breasts, and then just, like, it's so... It's so weird to watch movies in 2021 that are trying to be erotic thrillers, and then you watch this movie from 1998, and it's like... Why can't she be more like this?
Neve Campbell just dumped champagne on Denise Richards' boobies, and Matt Dillon licked it off. Like, what's stopping you from that now, you prudes?
Yeah.
Fucking prudes. Come on.
I don't know. I just think
that's the thing. Where's the sex like this in movies now? You know, like
we don't get it.
We don't get it, and it's like we are so prude. We are so prude.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched like 4 erotic thrillers this year that are new. And none of them hold a candle to this. Anywhere near this. Like, this is in a different state.
Yes, another dimension.
Lighting a bonfire compared to, like, these other movies that I'm watching. And I'm like, what was it about the 90s?
When Denise Richards throws off Neve Campbell's shirt onto the, I don't know why, like, her wet shirt in the pool, and she just goes, I feel we were all terrified of Y2K. We were all ready to die. They probably were all just like, tits out. Let's just go. We're all going to die anyway. Like, might as well just like let everything hang out.
Sky. Well, I do think that...
But like, that's like partially a joke, but also like partially true. That like, especially in 1990, and this was 1998, but like that was getting close to Y2K, and people were just like, well, fuck it. Like, chaos reigns a little bit. I mean, I haven't done a ton of research into that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it had something to do with it.
Well, I also think that this movie had to be made when it was made because Neve Campbell is coming off of Scream, where she was playing sort of like maybe not so much in the second movie, but in the first movie, this sort of like virginal final girl, right? And she was coming off of playing in Party of Five, that TV show. So I think she had like that sort of like family, you know, even though Scream is not a family movie, but sort of like that family vibe to her, that girl next door family vibe. And so what does she do? She goes here and she says, no, fuck this. It's sort of like what a lot of Disney people do after escaping the claws of like Disney comedies and that kind of stuff, you go full adult. And I feel like that's what is happening here.
Yeah. Yeah. It
And I'm here
definitely
for
is. I'm definitely here for it. I love it when like Disney stars are like, no, like I am now fully like a sex symbol. And you're like, you know what? Fucking great.
Good for you.
Good for you.
Own your body.
Own it. Well, Denise Richards had been in a bunch of stuff before this, though. I know that. But like, she's a sex symbol.
Oh yeah, she's always been, though.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just interesting to have like Denise Richards as like the sex symbol and then Neve Campbell come in. I was like, oh, but iconic. What an iconic pair. But I love that pairing. Like, holy shit.
Denise Richards gets like a lot of shit for her acting, but I think she was really good in this, to be perfectly honest.
I was just gonna say, she's not bad in this movie. Like, she definitely sells the like kind of like overly horny 18-year-old, but also like devious 18-year-old really well. I definitely thought that she was pretty, like, not a bad actor at all in this one.
No.
Especially because everyone's like kind of campy, so I think like her acting style kind of lends itself to that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This movie rules. Like, it's not progressive. Like, we're not like solving women's issues with this movie. Like, let's just be clear here.
No.
But it fucking rules. It is just nothing you expect. And I knew nothing about this movie going in, which is like the best way to do it. Because I was just like,
the funny thing though is that like I haven't probably seen this since my young masturbatory days of watching movies and when my parents went to bed. But I was like not knowing what was going to happen. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this movie started this way. And I was like, I know there's a lot of twists, but what's going to happen? It's like, oh my God, Neve Campbell's still alive? Like, all these little twists that are happening. I was like, it worked for me. And I haven't seen this in forever, but it's surprising.
It's really surprising. It's fun. It knows that it's like, it's basically just like, yeah, let's have like 3,000 different twists. Like, why not? Like, we'll just like turn it up to like 11, and it does it, and I love every second of it.
And
we'll
continue through the credits.
Through the credits, you have to watch the credits because the credit scenes are very important. But it's an incredible film, and I think we've really started off our
maybe on too much
thriller.
of a high note.
I know, shit. I think. Uh-oh. But needless to say, I am very excited to watch more erotic thrillers because this was a fucking experience.
Horny on Maine.
Horny on Maine.
So speaking
you say no, not November. I say never stop nutting November.
Yes, plus don't do no November.
Please don't do that.
It's not good for your health.
It's not good for you.
It's not good for your sexual health. I'm sorry.
No.
It's not.
No.
But what is good for your sexual health is watching more erotic thrillers. So where are we going next week, Mary Beth?
So next week, we are going to watch Jane Campion's 2003 film In the Cut.
Yeah.
Starring Meg Ryan, Mark Ruffalo, and Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Oh, I forgot Jennifer Jason Leigh.
I have been dying to see. And I just, it's one of those things I haven't. And now I'm using this as a fucking excuse to see it. And I'm so stoked for it. So that is next week's watch. So I cannot wait.
I'm excited.
But Terry, who are we talking to next week?
Okay, so on Monday, we are talking with writer, therapist, and podcaster Mike Snoonian. And he brought with him a Dan O'Bannon fucking banger, Dead and Buried.
Banger.
This movie, if you haven't seen it, before we talk about it, go out and watch this shit. It's on Shudder right now. Go watch it because this movie fucking slaps.
This movie is incredible. So please watch it before we talk about it. Or not, but you should because it's incredible. It should be talked about more.
It should be talked about more. It's celebrating its like, what, 30th birthday? 35th? 30th?
30 or I think it's 40th.
40th? No, it's not 40. Oh my God, is it 40th? Jesus Christ. Am I that old?
Sure, it's 40.
It's fucking 40. It's my age. I am as old as this fucking movie. Jesus Christ. But it's a movie that you definitely want to experience without knowing what's going to happen. It's like, I'm not a huge fan, like spoiler culture, yada, yada, yada. But this movie is one that you definitely, if you can go in without knowing what it's about and just let the movie.
That's exactly what I did.
Unfold.
And it was great because it didn't go anywhere where I thought it was gonna go.
No.
So Yeah, it's an incredible pick of Mike's. So I'm super stoked for you guys to hear it. And that movie is so good. And hopefully we can help revitalize the conversation around it because it's incredible. But listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. Did you watch one of the films that we watched this week and have thoughts? Do you have erotic thrillers that we should talk about? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm McGailey Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please, if you can, give us a rating and a review and make sure that you are subscribed.
Please. Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there. Most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.